Good evening and welcome to BBC Nine's longest running and perhaps most popular radio series, Blast from the Past, featuring Bob Dylan. Congrats, Mr. Tambourine Man. A closer look at what made the Nobel Prize Committee decide to award Bob Dylan as the first songwriter to be regarded as a literary figure. After half a century of singing, whining, strumming and songwriting, the Jewish-American modern troubadour Bob Dylan, born Robert Zimmerman, has been awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature for having created new poetic expressions within the great American song tradition. Deriving his stage surname from the first name of the Welsh poet Dylan Thomas, he has always refused to answer the frequently asked question about his sources of inspiration. I cannot tell you that, only God knows. Let alone give helpful hints to extrapolating Dylanologists, including Professor Christopher Ricks, who wrote the academic study Dylan's Visions of Sin, in which he tried to classify Dylan's songs according to the 7 deadly sins, the 4 cardinal virtues, and the 3 heavenly graces. This Oxford professor of poetry praises Dylan's Shakespearean ability to balance and reconcile opposite or discordant qualities in a great variety of songs. The American Bard's repertoire ranges from the medieval troubadour genres of Cervantes, Canso, Comiat, Descor, Ennui, and Desdanza, representing political protests, in Masters of War, for instance, love songs, ballads of renouncement, songs of conflict, indignation, notably in Idiot Wind, concerning the relentless gossip about his public persona, and sadness, in addition to American themes of segregation and racial injustice, Blind Willie McTell and the lonesome death of Hattie Carroll, for instance, and the Wild West, in Lily Rosemary and the Jack of Hearts, complete with characters and a complex plot. Dylan's charisma and idiosyncratic chanting turned him into an almost messianic figure in the 1960s, which he tried to play down by calling himself just a song and dance man. In the meantime, the decades of continual touring have transmogrified him into a tramp-like figure, and in a blizzard he was once arrested by a New York City policeman suspecting him of being a homeless drifter. Dylan's desire to break away from his origins, wrong name, wrong parents, and reinvent himself is both very American and classical, reminiscent of Huck Finn's lighting out for the territory and of Icarus ignoring his father's advice, which takes me back. Why does the angelic boy look distressed? Is he falling from the sky? I asked the tour guide who showed us, a group of primary school children, around the Royal Palace of Amsterdam in my hometown. A candidate for the 8th wonder of the world and the largest administrative building in Europe at the time, this palace was used for the official ceremony for the transfer of sovereignty over Indonesia by the Netherlands by Queen Juliana to Vice President Muhammad Hatta on the 27th of December 1949, more than 4 years after Bung Karno had proclaimed Indonesia an independent republic. On the marble floor, there are 2 maps of the world, showing the Eastern and Western hemispheres, and more specifically, the regions explored by the Dutch East Indies Company, VOC, ships in the 17th century. This was inspired by the map of the Roman Empire in the Porticus Vipsenia, a public building in ancient Rome. The tour guide had given us a quiz in the hope that we'd discover the 10 hidden secrets of the palace. There was the Titan Atlas holding the firmament, a statue of Poseidon showing the connection between Amsterdam and its sea trade, and other symbols going back to the period when the French Emperor Napoleon's brother was King of Holland. But what had caught my eye was the angel who was not happily playing the harp in heaven, but clearly in danger. The tour guide smiled and explained it was not exactly an angel, but a Greek boy named Icarus, who had ignored the advice of his wise father Daedalus not to fly too high or too low, because their self-made wings attached with wax would fall off due to excess heat or humidity. It was hung above the entrance to the bankruptcy chamber as a warning to merchants who might be overambitious or too daring in their financial exploits. The famous painter Rembrandt looked at it when he went bankrupt himself. The Dutch East Indies Company went bankrupt in 1800, incidentally. This cultural icon of Icarus was to reappear in English literature, in the works of major authors ranging from the medieval poet Chaucer, the greatest Renaissance dramatist and poet Shakespeare, the visionary poet Milton, and the 20th century experimentalist Joyce. Icarus appeared in the famous 16th century painting that would inspire poets in the 20th century, and appears in The Man Who Fell to Earth, a science fiction fantasy starring David Bowie, whose own dizzying fame made him fall into a maelstrom of drugs and alcohol. Psychiatrists use the term Icarus complex to describe the relationship between fascination for fire, bedwetting, high ambition, but also the highs and lows of bipolar disorder that killed the great comedian Robin Williams. The Icarus type appears in Chinese and ancient Babylonian and Indian myths as well. When we finished the tour, the guide concluded by telling us to keep our eyes open whenever we would see a historic building or monument and try to read or decipher and interpret it. And the same goes for any other art form, be it literature, music, fine art or dance, and by extension, song lyrics with a literary flavor and intent. This is best accomplished by keeping an open mind, expanding one's limited cultural horizon, and experiencing it not only rationally, but using all the senses and emotions. As Dylan himself once commented, what makes a good song is whether you can identify with the sentiment, with what it says. Literature consists of works produced by the creative imagination in the form of poetry, drama, short stories, and novels, even songs, that may be written from a historical, philosophical, or psychological point of view, or a complex combination of these. Literature always represents a culture and its people through well-organized, pressurized language and patterns, but it's not merely a historical or cultural artifact because it introduces us to new worlds of experience. Creative reading is in a sense rewriting the poem, story, song, drama, or comedy on the page from one's own perspective and based on one's own experience. We grow and evolve and perhaps even redefine ourselves while we are on our literary journey. When presented as a challenge instead of a monotonous soul-destroying burden, as something based on our own lifetime experience, require problem-solving and appealing to imaginative skills, the reader, spectator, or listener will become not just intellectually engaged, but emotionally and spiritually as well. This inspires and nourishes the head, heart, and soul, in other words. As the media anthropologist Micaela Lola Abrera observed, sadly, poetry is often now relegated to the hallowed halls of empty libraries collecting dust, but its relevance today is just as, if not more so, important as it was then. Poetry is a reminder of our humanity. Through verse, abstract emotions such as anger, confusion, distress, love, passion, fury, and depression are tangible. With people constantly bombarded by stimuli from television, the internet, and the pressures of daily life, it's easy to forget the value of reflection and catharsis. It can serve to release the torments of the past and the fears of the future. Poetry, whether as a reader or a writer, allows one to slow down and take account of the present. Bob Dylan's masterpiece Desolation Row, 1965, conjures up a parade of grotesques and oddities featuring a huge cast of iconic characters, some historical, Einstein, Nero, some biblical, Noah, Cain and Abel, some fictional, Ophelia, Romeo, Cinderella, some literary, T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound, and others springing from Dylan's indefatigable imagination. The surrealistic atmosphere of the song contrasts sharply with the opening lines based on the tragic lynching of 3 black men in Duluth, accused of raping a white woman, commercialized in the shape of postcards, witnessed by Dylan's father at the tender age of 8. The imagery of many songs, and the industrious songsmith penned over 600 of them, is unforgettable, but it must be admitted that every now and then the enigmatic Dylan leaves us with an insoluble riddle, again in the Mediterranean troubadour tradition of the devilna, or riddle, like a cryptogram. How on earth could these lines from Buckets of Rain be interpreted? Little red wagon, little red bike. I ain't no monkey, but I know what I like. The answer, my friend, must be blowing in the wind. We managed to reach the Nobel Prize winner by telephone, and I asked him one single question. He himself did not immediately respond to the news from Sweden, from the committee in Stockholm, which apparently offended them. But Bob Dylan was simply speechless. I hope he'll manage to answer my question, and if he's still speechless, maybe a chuckle will do. My question is the following. Though no great success at the time of publication, Bartleby the Scrivener, 1853, Story of Wall Street, is now among the most noted of American short stories. It's been considered a precursor of absurdist literature, touching on several of Franz Kafka's themes in such works as A Hunger Artist and The Trial, although there's nothing to indicate that the Bohemian writer was at all acquainted with the work of Melville, who remained largely forgotten until some time after Kafka's death in 1924. Now, in your songs there are many absurdist images, and I was wondering whether you'd been influenced by either Melville or Kafka, who in turn influenced Albert Camus, and so on. Is there anything you feel you have in common with those writers?
Where do you see it?
Thank you very much, Mr. Dylan. I'll close this edition of Blast from the Past with my rendition of a great recent song of yours, quite recent, Not Dark Yet. I hope you like it. All the best, and again, congratulations.
Shadows are falling, and I've been here all day. It's too hot to sleep, and time is running away. Feel like my soul has turned into steel. Still got the scars that the sun didn't heal. There's not even room enough to be anywhere. It's not dark yet, but it's getting there. My sense of humanity is going down the drain. Behind every beautiful thing there's been some kind of pain. She wrote me a letter, and she wrote it so kind. She put down in writing what was in her mind. I just don't see why I should even care. It's not dark yet, but it's getting there. Well, I've been to London, and I've been to gay Paris. I followed the river, and I got to the sea. I've been down on the bottom of a world full of lies. I ain't looking for nothing in anyone's eyes. Sometimes my burden is more than I can bear. It's not dark yet, but it's getting there. I was born here and I'll die here, against my will. I know it looks like I'm moving, but I'm standing still. Every nerve in my body is so vacant and numb. Can't even remember what I was fleeing from. Don't even hear the murmur of one sincere prayer. It's not dark yet, but it's getting there. It's not dark yet, but it's getting there. It's not dark yet, but it's getting there.